Itachi versus Obito. Which one of the two Uchihas in the Akatsuki would win a fight between them? I'll be talking about all relevant forms of the two characters, but I will focus more on live Itachi versus Orange Mask Obito as a hypothetical scenario if they ever came to blows during their Akatsuki time. I know most of people don't have a balanced opinion on this matter. Usually if you ask someone who would win in this fight, the answer would be either one of them stomps the other. But hear me out. The standard argument in favor of Itachi is that Obito was scared of Itachi and that he didn't want to provoke Itachi into a fight. That's why Obito waited until Itachi was dead to command Pain to attack Konoha and all that. Obito also mentioned that had Itachi known all of his secrets, he would have been dead when Itachi implanted Amaterasu on Sasuke. And those were his inner thoughts, so he wasn't lying to Sasuke about it. On the other hand, the standard argument in favor of Obito in a fight against Itachi is, how is Itachi ever gonna hit him? He has Kamui. Well, actually, to be honest, that's the standard argument for any fight Obito is in, but anyway, using both of these arguments to support one side or the other is not correct. First, Obito surely was wary of Itachi during their time in the Akatsuki, but it's not as if he was afraid of Itachi. Of course, he did not want to fight Itachi, as he wanted Itachi to keep working for the Akatsuki, but the main threat Itachi meant to Obito was that he could leak information about the Akatsuki and screw up all of Obito's plans. Though Obito having those reservations indicates he didn't think he could simply stomp Itachi anytime he wanted, and that a fight against Itachi would offer at least some level of danger to him. For the Obito is untouchable argument, of course Kamui is an extremely powerful jutsu, but we've seen Obito being tagged multiple times during the series, many times by ninjas that are way inferior to Itachi. So yes, Obito can be touched. If he lost an arm to Torune, he is definitely not untouchable. And some may say he doesn't care about losing his arms because he can just get more of them, which is true to a certain extent, but if he had the option between losing his arm or not during a fight, I would think he would definitely choose not to lose his arm, simply because losing an arm can hamper your ability to fight in further fights in that same day, and it's also very inconvenient. By the way, if you like versus battles like this, please subscribe to the channel and like the video to help me out. I'm definitely gonna make more videos like this in the future, so make sure you don't miss them. Needless to say, I don't think this fight would be a stomp one way or the other, but I do think the battle would most likely be quick, akin to the fight between Minato and Obito. The two characters are relative in speed and reaction time to each other, as Edo Tensei Itachi, which is actually physically slower than an alive Itachi because Edo Tenseis are nerfed, and White Mask Obito both fought KCM1 Naruto and reacted just fine to him. Some may say that KCM1 was actually holding back against Itachi because they were talking, but I don't see any indication of that. I think they were relative in speed. I don't think either Itachi or Obito were faster than KCM1, but they were in the same tier of speed and reaction time. Now let's be honest, Obito is a one-trick pony. He can phase through things to avoid attacks, and his only way to defeat Itachi would be to suck him into the Kamui dimension and starve him to death there. On the other hand, Itachi's only chance to actually win the fight would be to land an Amaterasu. I don't think Obito would have any problems reacting to Susanoo, as he could just bypass the Totsuka Blade by phasing through it, and he could also nag Susanoo's defenses as well if Itachi activates it when they're far away from each other. Unless the Yata mirror can somehow stop Obito when he is intangible, because it says the Yata mirror can stop anything, but we simply don't know if that would be the case. Tsukuyomi would most definitely not be effective against Obito either, as Obito has a Mangekyou and therefore can block or break out of Tsukuyomi. Heavy Sasuke was able to break out of it, so I don't think Obito would have too much trouble unless Itachi let Sasuke break out. However, that doesn't seem to be the implication according to the data books. Also, Obito is very good at genjutsu, being able to put a perfect Jinchuriki under the control of his Sharingan. Please do not think Izanami would work on Obito, as he definitely knew the ins and outs of that jutsu, seeing he was very proficient at Izanagi. And also, don't bring up Kodomatsu Kamui into the fight, because Itachi would never use that mid-fight. At the end of the day, this is what's going to happen in this fight. Obito will engage Itachi in melee in order to touch him and absorb him into the Kamui dimension, and that's because if Obito is touching his target, he can absorb him much quicker. Now, what happens from there depends on some assumptions. Would Obito be able to touch Itachi? Probably yes, as he was able to touch Minato. However, he was having a lot of trouble touching anyone in his fight against Bee, Naruto Guy, and Kakashi, though there was a 4 versus 1, so Obito should have more trouble anyway, and those were 4 very powerful shinobis. So, assuming Obito actually touches Itachi, because Itachi wouldn't be able to protect himself with the Susanoo as Obito comes in, would he be able to absorb Itachi? Well, I think that's unclear, but I'm leaning towards no. We don't see Obito trying to absorb a whole lot of enemies after touching them during the series mid-fight. He tries that on 4 people, succeeding 2 times and failing 2 times as well. And I am disregarding the arc because we're talking about Orange Mask Obito here. The first opponent that he fails to absorb is Minato, who just teleported away. Then he's able to absorb Fu and Torune, Danzo's bodyguards, and then he fails to absorb Konan. The 2 enemies he was unable to absorb were much more powerful than the other 2, but Minato was very fast as he was able to teleport away, but Konan, she was able to stop Obito from absorbing her through the use of paper bomb explosives. So I think that if Konan was able to escape by using her papers, we have to assume Itachi would be able to react to the absorption and try to do something about it at least. The best response would probably be to use Amaterasu right on Obito's face, as they would be very close to each other. I believe Itachi would be able to use Amaterasu before he is completely absorbed. That could be more difficult if Obito is able to catch Itachi off guard from behind, for example. But let's be real, it's very difficult to catch Itachi off guard at all, and Itachi is considerably more intelligent and has more battle IQ than Obito, meaning he would probably not fall for any of Obito's traps. Which would lead us to the next assumption. How would Obito react to a point-blank Amaterasu? We saw him getting hit by it when Itachi implanted Amaterasu on Sasuke's eyes, and I have to assume Itachi using the jutsu himself would be much faster than the implanted version he commanded Sasuke to use when he saw Obito's Sharingan, but it's very plausible that Obito let himself get hit by Amaterasu and then just Izanagi out of it because he was acting in front of Sasuke and he wanted to convince Sasuke about Itachi's true intentions. Jubito reacted to Amaterasu, but Jubito was orders of magnitude more powerful than Orange Mask Obito. Still, Obito was able to keep up with Minato when he was like 14 to some extent, and also reacted to a blitz attempt by the 4th Raikage who was able to dodge Amaterasu. But the Amaterasu Itachi would shoot at Obito would be at much closer range. Also, you could say that Obito's Kamui could absorb Amaterasu as he was absorbing Itachi, but I don't know if that would be a reasonable assumption because he wasn't able to absorb Konan's explosions completely, and if Itachi aims somewhere far away from Obito's eyes where Kamui is centered on, I think it would not be absorbed and it would go straight for Obito. However, I still think Obito would be able to phase through Amaterasu, which would also stop him from absorbing Itachi. If he is unable to dodge that Amaterasu, then he loses, or rather he would lose an eye as he could still Izanagi out of it if it comes to that. On the other hand, if Itachi attempts other responses such as a fireball or something like that, he would lose as well, as Obito would most likely succeed in absorbing him, unless if you think Itachi could use Tsukuyomi and the concentration required to block or break out of it would stop Obito from absorbing Itachi. Though there may be one other option for Itachi to stop the absorption, and that would be to activate his Susanoo as soon as it starts. We know the Susanoo activation is instantaneous as Itachi was able to release it in time to block Kirin, so he would be able to do the same when he was being absorbed by Kamui. And if Itachi was already using the Susanoo when Obito started the absorption, that would also be useless. However, if Itachi wasn't using the Susanoo and then just banked it out as soon as Obito touched him, that could work, but we don't know exactly how the mechanics of it would go. I mean, if he released his corporeal Susanoo, would Obito be thrown out of the Susanoo as he was absorbing Itachi? Because we know Obito has to manifest his physical body to do so. Also, if Itachi used the ribcage, would Obito still be able to absorb him? Not sure. The ribcage would sever Obito's physical connection with Itachi, meaning the absorption would be much slower and Itachi would be able to do something else to react to it. But still, I don't think Itachi would be able to hit Obito with anything as well during their first exchange. So after all these assumptions, we have to assume both fighters countered each other out without getting harmed. What comes next? Well, Obito doesn't have much else to do. He would just keep trying to absorb Itachi, maybe create a distraction trying to catch him off guard, but good luck doing that against Itachi. I think his best option would probably be to use Izanagi and let Amaterasu hit him, trying to deceive Itachi and thinking Obito was defeated, and then catching Itachi off guard like he did with Conan, but still, I find it difficult to believe Itachi would lower his guard, and activating the Susanoo is still instantaneous, so Itachi could do it as soon as he feels Obito touching him. Itachi, on the other hand, would have to race against time, or should I say, against his chakra. Obito's best option would be to tire Itachi out, constantly trying to absorb Itachi and forcing him to use his very chakra-consuming abilities in order to stop the absorption. Essentially, if all assumptions I made about the first exchange are correct, this fight might turn into a battle of attrition where Obito would clearly have the edge. However, Itachi would not just sit around and let Obito get in melee and do whatever he wanted. Itachi would strategize. Now, assuming how well a character would strategize in a versus battle video is essentially fan fiction. I mean, I could easily come up with a battle strategy for Itachi to beat Obito if I had to write that fight and if Itachi had to win it, but that's not really fair. However, I will say Obito was fooled by Naruto's shadow clone before, so Itachi could probably try the same thing. For instance, he could let Obito believe he was absorbing Itachi's real body, but it's a shadow clone, and then Itachi uses the explosive shadow clone as Obito is absorbing him and just explode it on Obito's face. Maybe it could work. Alternatively, he could make Obito absorb a shadow clone and then use that clone to attack Obito from within the Kamui dimension like Kakashi did in the War Arc. That would require Itachi to understand Obito's abilities, but I'm pretty sure Itachi is smart enough to figure out how Obito's abilities work after fight for a while. After all, he completely dissected Chibaku Tensei by glancing at it for 2 seconds. When it's all said and done, I think Itachi wins 3 out of 10 times and Obito 7 out of 10 if they fought during their Akatsuki time. That depends on if the assumptions are correct or not, of course. If Itachi can react to the absorption, he obviously loses. If Obito cannot react to a point-blank Amaterasu, he obviously loses. If Itachi is able to come up with a grand strategy or has prep time or anything, he's probably gonna win. I don't think Obito would be able to catch Itachi off guard, even with Izanagi like he did with Conan. But still, he has a massive stamina advantage over Itachi, and I think that's the deciding factor in Obito's favor here. When we talk about Masked Man Obito, I don't see the fight changing too much if you don't count the QB, of course, because that would be trouble for Itachi. Though Itachi could probably just use Amaterasu to defeat the QB like Sasuke did with the Hachibi, I see in live Itachi versus Masked Man Obito having somewhat similar odds, though there are some differences. Obito back then used his chains, which are a very good strategy when you can phase through people. He just let the enemies pass through him and then caught them with the chains, capturing them after it with Kamui. Though Itachi would still be able to use his Susanoo in order to deny Obito physical contact. Also, Masked Man Obito was way less experienced than Orange Mask Obito and less intelligent than Itachi. Honestly, Minato's trick with a kunai when he hit and defeated Obito was extremely obvious. The first time I read that chapter in the manga, before knowing what's gonna happen, as soon as Minato threw the kunai at Obito's back, back, I called what was going to happen. And I was like 12 when that chapter came out, so Obito clearly lacked experience if he couldn't tell what Minato was about to do if a 12-year-old me could. And Obito knew everything Minato could do because Minato was his sensei, so assuming he would teleport behind Obito's back should be the first thing to come to his mind. But he obviously didn't. Maybe he was flustered because he was fighting his old teacher, but still, I think alive Itachi would have somewhat better odds against Masked Man Obito if we don't count the QB, which would probably make things much more difficult, even with the Amaterasu one-shot hypothesis. Itachi could easily take care of Blood Mist Obito, as that Obito was unable to use his Kamui to its fullest extent and was extremely inexperienced, much more so than Masked Man Obito. War Arc Obito, the one with the white mask, would absolutely stomp Itachi. The buffs he gained were just too good with that Rinnegan. And if you throw in the 6 Jinchuriki he controlled, that's just mean. Obito would steamroll Itachi then. I don't really think I have to mention Jubito here. Obviously Jubito destroys any version of Itachi you can think of. When we talk about Edo Itachi, he would make Obito's life up until Orange Mask much harder. First, we don't know if Obito knows a sealing jutsu to deal with the Edo Tensei. Maybe he does, as he is very proficient with barriers and those types of jutsus, but if he doesn't have one, I guess he would just try and absorb Edo Itachi, but even if he could absorb him, Itachi would just stay there until Obito finds someone that can seal Itachi, but that would still be a problem because Itachi would be able to fight, and that Itachi, without getting tired, with unlimited chakra, would be much more dangerous than an alive Itachi. So I would say his chances of winning here, of Edo Itachi winning, are actually pretty high. War Arc Obito and Jubito are still much stronger than Edo Itachi though, so they would win that fight. Although this is a strange fight. I know many people think Orange Mask Obito is a god and that he would stomp anyone before the War Arc, but I think he is a little bit overhyped, and of course other people just simp hard for Itachi, saying he could solo Kaguya and Madara, but by analyzing everything those two characters have done and said, I think this is a fair way to depict their versus battle and the odds of them beating each other. Comment below if I missed anything or if you disagree with my points. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss any videos in the future, and like the video to help me out. Thanks for watching.